The scene begins with the protagonist recalling past events. He remembers a day when countless ominous black monoliths descended from the sky. Barriers were deployed soon after, but monsters later identified as disaster beasts broke through and invaded the human world. Among them was the demon of ruin, Linga, whose arrival led to widespread destruction and loss of life. During that period, large numbers of demonic creatures attacked armed forces across the city. Buildings were torn apart, streets were overrun, and residents were killed as the monsters advanced. Civilians fled in panic, attempting to escape the chaos unfolding around them. Amid the crowd, a man was seized by a beast and killed while trying to protect his family. His wife, holding their child, ran desperately through the streets, weaving through falling debris and incoming attacks. The child witnessed his father's death and cried out as the woman continued running, doing everything she could to survive. A larger beast noticed them escaping and signaled one of its flying companions. The creature swooped down and struck, causing the child to slip from the woman's grasp. Injured and desperate, she urged her child to flee on his own. The child cried out as she was left behind, and the memory faded. The scene returns to the present, where the protagonist stands silently in the school assembly ground. He appears distracted, still lost in the memory. When he regains awareness, it becomes clear that tears are falling from his eyes, though he tries to brush it off as nothing unusual. A friend approaches and casually comments on how the sudden school assembly disrupted their usual routine. The protagonist quickly shifts attention away from himself and instead points out the strange appearance of the man standing on stage. The commander of the northern continent addresses the students, explaining that after the appearance of the disaster beasts, certain humans awakened powers capable of opposing them. These individuals came to be known as awakeners. 10 years earlier, awakeners from around the world had united during a massive invasion near the north bank of the Azure River, successfully repelling the monsters in what became known as the River Crossing War. Although attacks decreased afterward, monolith activity had recently surged, signaling another large-scale invasion in the near future. The protagonist's friend quietly identifies the commander and notes his importance. The protagonist reflects internally, realizing he recognizes the name, but finds the man's appearance very different from what he had imagined. His friend explains that despite appearances, the commander was the first awakener and the one responsible for humanity's understanding of monoliths and disaster beasts. He also mentions that even the most renowned awakeners were once his students. The commander continues, revealing that recent research suggests ordinary people have a chance to awaken simply by touching a monolith. The purpose of the assembly is announced clearly. Students are being given the opportunity to awaken and prepare for the coming war. The crowd reacts with excitement and tension as a monolith rises from the ground. Students express amazement and hope, dreaming of becoming awakeners themselves. The protagonist's friend becomes enthusiastic at the possibility, while the protagonist responds with a cold sense of anticipation. As the students begin moving forward, the protagonist advances without hesitation, leaving his friends behind despite their attempts to stop him. A familiar girl tries to keep him in line, but his focus remains fixed ahead. His eyes begin to glow faintly as long-suppressed emotions surface. The scene shifts indoors, where a monolith has been placed for testing. One by one, students approach under the supervision of a guard. Many touch the monolith, but none show signs of awakening. Tension builds as repeated failures continue, and anxiety spreads among the watching students. Some begin doubting their chances, questioning whether physical ability or talent matters at all. Concerns arise about the school's future if no awakeners emerge. The guard continues calling students forward without pause. Eventually, Hikaru Oishi steps up. Murmurs ripple through the crowd as students react nervously to his presence. When he touches the monolith, it finally responds, drawing shocked attention from everyone present. As the reaction intensifies, Hikaru internally believes this moment will bring him recognition from the commander and his companion. Moments later, his awakening is confirmed, revealing unusually high base potential for a first-time awakener. The commander's companion quietly acknowledges the result, noting that despite being newly awakened, Hikaru's total abilities far exceed the expected baseline, marking him as a rare case among the students. Hikaru confidently steps forward, believing himself to be the first awakened of the day. As he continues lingering near the monolith, someone suddenly grips his shoulder and pulls him away from it. Irritated and aggressive, Hikaru reacts instantly, his temper flaring as the surrounding students recognize the interruption. The crowd quickly realizes that Itsuki has stepped out of line, and many assume the situation will end badly for him. Among the observers, the blue-haired woman senses an unusually intense, emotional pressure radiating from Itsuki. Ignoring the attention around him, Itsuki places his hand on the monolith. In that moment, his thoughts focus entirely on the disaster beasts and the hatred he has carried ever since encountering them. The commander notices that the boy's resolve feels fundamentally different from that of the others. Almost immediately, a massive blue entity manifests behind Itsuki. Energy begins pouring violently from the monolith, engulfing him completely. The surge does not stop there, expanding outward and flooding the entire arena. The students are left stunned as the energy blooms like a massive flower, stretching hundreds of feet in every direction. While shock spreads through the crowd, Itsuki's friends react without hesitation, cheering and celebrating his awakening. It becomes clear that such a phenomenon only occurs when someone awakens the rarest class, known as the Order Breaker. Faced with this overwhelming display, Hikaru's expression darkens, his earlier confidence fading into frustration. Inside his mind, Itsuki finds himself in a calm, isolated space. He wonders whether he has truly awakened. There, he sees himself seated at the center of a glowing blue lotus formed entirely from energy. Information manifests before him, revealing his class and his Z-rank skill named Overmiss. However, when he observes his attributes, every value initially registers at 0. Soon after, his gift, Nirvana, activates, causing all of his stats to surge dramatically to 800. Realizing the meaning of this power, Itsuki feels confident that he can finally eradicate the beast that destroyed his past. Back in the real world, the intense light forces everyone present to shield their eyes. As the brightness gradually fades, Itsuki's silhouette becomes visible once more before the monolith. Hikaru stares in disbelief at what he has just witnessed, while the blue-haired woman struggles to comprehend how a newly awakened student could possess such absurd strength. The commander openly acknowledges that this awakening surpasses all previous records, declaring Itsuki the strongest awakened in history. His visible attributes stabilize at 200 each, igniting an uproar of excitement throughout the crowd. While most celebrate, Hikaru's fury deepens. Convinced that his moment has been stolen, he rises into the air, surrounded by crackling lightning. Acting on pure resentment, he launches his newly acquired ability toward Itsuki. As the attack advances, Itsuki's power automatically begins analyzing the technique at extreme speed. The lightning crashes violently into the ground, but Itsuki is already gone. Confusion spreads as no one can locate him. An instant later, he appears directly behind Hikaru, gripping him by the head and dropping him to the ground without resistance. Itsuki calmly notes that the analysis completed quickly due to the skill's low rank, allowing him to acquire the Thunderwave ability. As the process finishes, his energy surges once again. His friends notice the glow returning and make light-hearted remarks, relieved to see him unharmed. Within that familiar mental space, Itsuki understands that he always arrives here once an analysis is complete. New details appear, showing his newly acquired skill and an additional increase in his attributes. Returning to reality, he looks down at Hikaru, who lies trembling and powerless. Surrounding students whisper in disbelief, noticing that Itsuki's lightning far surpasses the original. Itsuki himself is surprised when he realizes his total stats have climbed to 840. Suddenly, the sky darkens as heavy rain begins to fall. Moments later, a massive dark monolith descends rapidly toward the school. Recognizing the danger, the commander cancels the ceremony and orders an evacuation, certain that the attack is directed at him. While others retreat, Itsuki remains unmoving. The commander acknowledges his courage as panic spreads and students flee. The massive pillar crashes into the arena, filling the air with dust and debris. Itsuki stands alone as warnings echo from behind, but he remains resolute, his hatred for the disaster beasts resurfacing. Despite concerns that he is still a rookie awakened, He reassures his friends with calm confidence before facing the threat directly. Emerging from a monolith is a skeleton soldier, the same type of creature responsible for his parents' deaths. Its stats reveal a total far below Itsuki's own. Seeing this as a test of his newly gained strength, Itsuki charges forward without hesitation. The collision sends shockwaves through the arena as his lightning-coated strike shatters the creature's chest, launching it backward and breaking it apart. The observers are stunned, but the commander quickly points out that the skeleton possesses a dangerous ability known as bone fire, capable of incinerating anyone who touches it. Blue flames engulf Itsuki, drawing cries of despair from his friends and twisted satisfaction from Hikaru. Inside the flames, Itsuki's analysis activates once more. Despite the damage, the commander senses that the boy still has untapped potential. Within his mind, Itsuki relives the memory of his mother being consumed by similar flames while protecting him. As the analysis reaches completion, he realizes the battle is far from over. A blue lotus blooms again as Itsuki re-emerges from the fire, completely restored. His new ability manifests, healing his injuries and further strengthening him. His friends react in disbelief as he stands unharmed. The blue-haired woman questions the limits of this recovery, curious whether such regeneration has any boundaries. The skeleton soldier roars in confusion as its fire proves ineffective. Itsuki activates his newly acquired power, forming black ice armor around his body. Flames wash over him without causing harm, while lightning and ice merge seamlessly, amplifying his combat ability. Shaping the ice into a draconic form, he charges forward at overwhelming speed before creating a massive blade of ice and thunder. The strike lands cleanly, annihilating the creature instantly. The arena falls silent as the remains scatter. Even seasoned observers struggle to believe what they have witnessed. Itsuki's armor dissolves as attention turns back to him. His friends rush over, relieved by his victory, while he looks around, noticing someone missing from the crowd. As order is restored, the commander instructs his assistant to handle the aftermath. Speculation spreads about Itsuki's future, but before any conclusions can be drawn, a presence behind him captures his attention. Turning around, he finds himself face to face with the commander, who studies him with unwavering seriousness. While other students watch from afar, the commander approaches and acknowledges that Itsuki is far from ordinary. Sensing the deep rage and hatred within the boy's heart, he expresses a desire to understand the source of those emotions. Itsuki reveals that everything began 10 years earlier, on the day his parents were killed by a disaster beast. The memory resurfaces clearly in his mind, showing his younger self frozen in fear as the attack unfolded. He remembers crying helplessly, unable to understand what was happening. He narrowly survived that day only because an awakened appeared at the last moment and drove the creature away. In her final moments, his mother urged him to move forward and walk his own path, even if he had to do so alone. The child could only scream for her, overwhelmed by terror and confusion. After their deaths, Itsuki blamed himself relentlessly. That guilt lingered for a long time, eventually transforming into an uncontrollable fury. In that moment of loss, he remembers staring directly at the creature responsible and feeling a hatred so deep it consumed him entirely. His eyes burned red as he vowed to one day take revenge for everything that had been taken from him. Returning to the present, Itsuki finishes recounting his past. Tears remain in his eyes as he swears to eliminate every monster without exception. When questioned about why he still cries despite harboring such hatred, he explains that ever since that day, only his right eye sheds tears, serving as a reminder that his hatred must never fade. The commander invites him to become his student and to join the Saviors League. He explains that it is a global organization composed of the strongest awakened, all dedicated to fighting the disaster beasts. Its members receive elite training and generous monthly rewards, but he also makes it clear that nothing comes without cost. Saviors fight on the front lines, risking their lives to protect humanity. Itsuki shows no interest in rewards or resources. What matters to him lies elsewhere. With unwavering resolve, he declares his desire to become a savior and fight on the front lines. The commander explains that to qualify, he must place within the top 100 in a tournament of over 1,000 participants. He mentions the standing record of 115,000 points, set 11 years earlier. Itsuki immediately recognizes the name of the hero known as the light of humanity and the strongest awakened in history. The commander admits that comparing anyone to such a figure is unreasonable, yet states that Itsuki possesses the potential to eventually stand beside him. Hearing this, Itsuki confidently declares that he will surpass the legendary hero. The boldness of that claim draws a rare glimmer of interest from the commander. A memory surfaces of the hero reflecting on the need for a new successor to rise and carry the war forward. In the present, the commander acknowledges that the presence he had been waiting for has finally appeared. Itsuki is then taken to a new location and observes a massive structure before him. The commander explains that the stone monuments function as gateways to the world of the disaster beasts. If the monsters are slain without destroying the portals, more will continue to emerge. The facility exists to isolate these monuments and also serves as a training ground for awakened individuals. He describes it as a stage notorious for its danger and known among awakened as the Rookie Graveyard. The commander notes that even the legendary hero required over 3 minutes to clear it during his rookie days. Reminding Itsuki of his declaration to surpass that hero, he challenges him to complete the stage in under 3 minutes. If he succeeds, the commander promises to officially take him on as a student. As they enter the facility, onlookers quickly recognize the commander and begin speculating about the young man accompanying him. Itsuki notices the attention and wonders about the commander's reputation. Inside, the environment reveals that the beasts within possess far greater strength than ordinary opponents. A crowd gathers, forming opinions about Itsuki, with some dismissing him outright. He proceeds to register for entry and chooses to enter alone, surprising those around him. Skepticism spreads, and some view his decision as reckless. Despite warnings and mockery, Itsuki remains unmoved. He makes it clear that his sole purpose there is to fight. After receiving clearance, he approaches the gate and prepares himself, remembering the promise to complete everything within 3 minutes. Once the challenge begins, he moves immediately, his eyes glowing red as he runs across the vast interior of the stage. The space is far larger than he expected, and he soon senses enemies closing in. A wooden monster emerges and attacks, but its strength proves insignificant. Without hesitation, Itsuki forms an ice weapon and charges forward. His confidence grows as he faces a gathering horde of similar creatures, all converging on him at once. Outside the stage, concern arises over why such a dangerous area was chosen for a rookie. Memories surface of the legendary hero effortlessly destroying a near-invincible beast, his expression cold and detached, more godlike than human. The commander explains that while the hero represents salvation, Itsuki embodies the opposite of being driven by hatred. Though unrefined, his potential is undeniable. Inside the stage, Itsuki realizes that enemies of this level cannot even trigger his deeper abilities. His hatred intensifies, reflected clearly in his red eyes. He charges forward, cutting through every monster in his path without slowing down. As bodies fall, he briefly wonders whether the challenge is truly this simple. That thought fades quickly when he senses something unusual. A previously defeated creature begins regenerating rapidly, revealing that the real test has only just begun. The creature regenerates completely, its form restoring itself while its overall strength increases. To protect himself, Itsuki activates his black ice wall and shapes the ice along his arm into a blade. Through repeated observation, he understands that ordinary damage will not stop the regeneration and that only overwhelming force can delay it. As he continues fighting, his analysis steadily progresses. He attacks without pause, striking again and again with ice blades. As the analysis advances further, he gathers his power and brings down a massive ice sword in a single downward strike. The attack cleanly splits the wooden creature into 2 equal halves. Refusing to allow recovery, Itsuki uses his ice-covered arms to force the separated sections apart. Under constant pressure, the creature finally breaks into multiple fragments. However, prolonged use of black ice places a heavy burden on his mana. Before he can recover, the shattered remains begin to draw together again. The creature reforms in front of him and immediately launches another attack. Itsuki realizes that the regeneration is tied directly to the continued analysis, which increases with each cycle of destruction and recovery. To conserve energy, he shifts to lightning-based attacks, maintaining distance while continuing to push the analysis forward. Time becomes a pressing concern as the limit approaches quickly. With little margin left, he begins combining ice and thunder, forcing repeated regeneration to accelerate the copying process. The risk is high, especially if the copied ability requires mana to activate. While evading incoming attacks, the analysis continues to climb. Despite growing exhaustion, Itsuki commits fully, accepting the danger. Mid-attack, the analysis increases further as he surges forward, his body surrounded by lightning. He lands a decisive blow directly to the creature's head, expending nearly all of his remaining energy. The strain leaves him barely able to stand. Taking advantage of his weakened state, the creature counterattacks, impaling him with multiple wooden spikes. At that moment, Itsuki realizes that his mana reserves have been completely depleted. Even so, he remains composed, aware that the copied ability does not consume mana. As the analysis reaches completion, a blue lotus manifests around him. A new ability awakens, restoring his body, healing his injuries, and enhancing his physical attributes. With renewed strength, he focuses on the creature and activates the newly acquired power. Bringing his hands together, he releases the ability directly forward. A massive lotus-shaped explosion erupts, striking the wooden monster head-on. The impact spreads outward in a destructive wave, obliterating the creature and scorching the surrounding area. When the aftermath settles, nothing remains of the monster. Itsuki observes the result calmly, noting the effectiveness of the new ability and realizing that his mana has also been restored. Amid the lingering smoke, he notices a glowing green crystal resting on the ground. Outside the stage, concern grows as time continues to pass. Assumptions form that clearing the stage so quickly would be impossible, even if defeat itself was unlikely. Moments later, the display confirms completion, revealing a newly set record. The result leaves the observer stunned, as the clear time is shown to be just over 2 minutes. Shortly after, Itsuki exits the portal and collapses from exhaustion. Despite his condition, the record stands confirmed. The crowd reacts strongly, surprised that a level 0 rookie surpassed a long-standing benchmark by a wide margin. Once he regains his footing, Itsuki approaches Mendue Izumi and formally acknowledges him as his master. Mendue accepts him as a disciple, visibly pleased in a way rarely seen. His assistant notices the change immediately, recognizing how unusual the reaction is. While many are shocked by the announcement, doubt still lingers among some observers. Noticing the situation, the receptionist approaches with an apology and presents a small gift. Itsuki accepts it without resentment, understanding her earlier concern. His calm response leaves her visibly flustered. Soon after, the blue-haired woman signals that it is time to leave. The commander suggests increasing the difficulty, explaining that the previous stage no longer presents a challenge for Itsuki. As they walk, Mendue clarifies that a creature's level alone does not define its threat. Instead, the deciding factor is species. Some beasts act purely on instinct, while others possess intelligence equal to or exceeding that of humans, making them far more dangerous. The blue-haired woman adds that although awakened beasts are similar in nature, only humans possess structure classes. Based on this, she explains that Itsuki's next destination will be the advanced stages of District 4. As they move on, Itsuki briefly reflects on the creatures he defeated. The assistant senses a subtle change in his presence and grows uneasy, unsure of his thoughts. Nearby, whispers spread that the stages in District 4 are controlled by someone named Ri Kanashida. The discussion quickly dies down as fear of repercussions sets in. Elsewhere, Ri Kanashida is shown asserting his authority, behaving arrogantly, and disregarding rules that apply to others. He treats the area as his own and shows no intention of yielding to anyone. Later, Itsuki opens the gift he received and finds a glowing white stone inside. While seated with the commander and the assistant, he examines it carefully, recognizing its nature. Mendue confirms that it is a karma stone. Itsuki recalls the larger green crystal left behind by the defeated creature and notes the difference in color. The assistant is shocked to learn that an intermediate karma stone formed in a beginner-level stage. The blue-haired woman explains that karma stones store experience energy released when beasts are defeated, normally absorbed directly to increase level. The formation of such a stone in that environment is highly unusual. Manhwa theorizes that Itsuki's unique condition prevented normal absorption. The energy from the earlier battle was instead distributed among those present. Later, when Itsuki fought alone, the excess energy condensed into the stone rather than being absorbed. When the assistant questions how Itsuki's strength increases without leveling, Manhwa immediately stops the discussion, stating that an awakens gift is confidential. He instructs Itsuki to use the stone as he sees fit and informs him that he will be leaving for a conference. Before departing, he lays down clear rules, including secrecy and clearing multiple stages. Itsuki accepts the instructions confidently. In District 4, two awaken argue with security guards over access to a reserved stage. Tensions rise as they protest the misuse of authority. Before the situation can escalate further, a presence emerges behind them. One of the awakened attempts to retaliate, but is struck down instantly. The second is overwhelmed just as quickly. The attacker reveals himself as Teru Oga, a level 12 enforcer loyal to Riken Ashida. His metallic form and overwhelming power leave no room for resistance. He issues a clear warning that no one may enter without permission and demonstrates the consequences without hesitation. Despite attempts by others to de-escalate the situation, Teru shows no restraint and leaves the two awakened incapacitated. At that moment, Itsuki and the blue-haired woman arrive, moving toward the injured individuals as attention turns toward the enforcer. The surrounding crowd quickly reacts to Itsuki's appearance, noting that he is only level 0 and assuming his decision to intervene will end badly. Some also recognize the woman beside him as someone familiar. Teru Oga blocks the path forward, making it clear that entry without permission will not be allowed. Itsuki understands that defeating him is the only way forward. The blue-haired woman considers contacting the administrator, but Itsuki stops her, recalling his master's words about standing firm for what he believes in. He asks the assistant to look after the injured awakened while he handles the situation himself. Although mocked for his level, Teru senses an unusual pressure coming from the young man. Despite the massive gap in level, Itsuki's total attributes far exceed expectations, causing even the experienced enforcer to tense up. Before Teru can react, Itsuki closes the distance at extreme speed and lands a direct punch to Teru's metallic face. The sudden impact shocks the onlookers, many of whom cannot even track Itsuki's movement. Cracks form along Teru's metal surface, forcing him to acknowledge the speed behind the attack. However, he quickly retaliates with a powerful kick, sending Itsuki flying backward. Realizing brute force alone will not be enough, Itsuki activates Thunder Wave to enhance his agility and combat efficiency. The enemy's metallization ability begins to be analyzed, progressing steadily as the fight continues. Itsuki understands that striking exposed, non-metallized areas will be the key to victory. Planting his feet firmly, he commits fully. Teru prepares to counter, confident in his superiority, but Itsuki increases his speed further and attacks before full metallization can occur. A relentless barrage follows, and the analysis accelerates rapidly as each hit lands in succession. The speed and variety of Itsuki's abilities leave the crowd stunned, many questioning how a level 0 awakened can wield powers associated with other classes. As the pressure mounts, Teru realizes that continuing at this pace will lead to defeat. Forced into desperation, he unleashes a massive surge of energy and fully metallizes his body. The transformation drastically increases his defensive power, pushing it beyond 500 points. Despite his confidence, the process consumes a significant amount of mana, a detail Itsuki immediately recognizes. Rather than attempting to exhaust his opponent, Itsuki decides to finish the fight decisively. The analysis reaches completion, and once again a blue lotus manifests around him. Those watching struggle to understand the nature of the ability, unaware that a new power has been acquired. The piercing sphere forms in front of Itsuki, slow-moving but dense with energy. Many dismiss the attack due to its lack of speed, including Teru himself. However, when the sphere makes contact, it pierces straight through his metallic defense, ignoring its durability entirely. The attack passes through his body, shattering the belief in his absolute defense and leaving him incapacitated. Itsuki deliberately spares a vital strike, recognizing his opponent as human. He then turns his attention to the remaining enforcers, instructing them to take the injured to medical care before ordering everyone to leave. Shaken by the outcome, the men retreat quickly with their fallen leader. The crowd reacts with disbelief as the victory settles in. Those Itsuki saved approach him, proposing that they form a team to clear the stage together, explaining that their group includes a healer who could sustain repeated use of his new ability. Itsuki recognizes the strategic value, but refuses without hesitation, choosing to proceed alone. The decision stuns the onlookers, as entering an advanced stage solo carries significant risk. The blue-haired woman warns him, and the assistant expresses concern over the durability of the upcoming enemies and his remaining mana. Despite this, Itsuki reassures her. After giving final advice about enemy behavior and mana consumption, she turns her attention back to the wounded. Itsuki approaches the gate and enters the advanced stage alone. Inside, he finds a barren, rocky battlefield filled with stone creatures watching from afar. Their nature becomes immediately apparent as beings that convert magic directly into defensive strength. Itsuki activates the piercing sphere to test whether these monsters trigger its passive condition. When the sphere strikes, it cleanly pierces a stone creature, destroying it instantly. With the kill, the sphere's speed increases significantly, confirming his theory. More stone creatures emerge, noticeably more aggressive than the first. Recognizing that slow, heavily armored enemies are ideal targets, Itsuki continues fighting, carefully monitoring his mana usage. Each attack consumes a fixed amount of energy, leaving him with only a few opportunities remaining. To conserve power, he devises a plan to eliminate multiple enemies at once. Launching the sphere into the ground, he creates a cloud of debris to obscure vision. Using the moment, he leaps above the battlefield and attacks from an elevated angle. The sphere pierces through multiple targets, further increasing its speed before Itsuki finally collapses from exhaustion. Although completely drained, he notes that the ability has grown significantly stronger, capable of striking faster targets than before. The ground then begins to shake violently. A massive presence emerges as the stage boss reveals itself. The stone giant activates gigantification, swelling to an enormous size and radiating overwhelming power. Itsuki immediately enhances his agility with Thunder Wave and considers whether the piercing sphere can penetrate such a formidable opponent. Aiming for the head is his best chance. He jumps high to line up an attack, but the creature strikes first. Unable to evade midair, Itsuki raises his black ice wall in defense. The blow shatters the ice instantly and sends him crashing into the arena wall, making it clear that this opponent far exceeds anything he has faced so far. Even so, Itsuki remains composed. As a giant's ability is detected, his copying process activates once again, giving him a potential path forward. Far away, news of Teru Oga's defeat reaches Rikanashida. Irritated by the report, he learns that the one responsible was not a high-level awakened, but a rookie. The revelation infuriates him. Wasting no time, he prepares to move personally, determined to deal with whoever dared to defy the authority of the Kanashida family. Back inside the stage, the analysis reaches completion and Itsuki emerges within the Blue Lotus. The copied ability is secured while the giant stone creature remains locked onto him. The piercing sphere evolves to its second level, gaining increased speed and adjustable size. Itsuki quickly understands that the passive effects have doubled and that mana can now be used to alter the sphere's scale. Despite his excitement, his overall attributes temporarily drop as the transformation settles. Positioning himself above the golem, he expends all remaining mana to form the largest piercing sphere he can sustain. The massive purple-black construct descends with overwhelming force, piercing straight through the stone giant from top to bottom and annihilating it completely. Lying on the ground afterward, drained of mana, Itsuki reflects that he may have overcommit. The golem is confirmed defeated, and the piercing sphere gains a massive increase in speed. Holding a green karma stone, he calculates the potential growth of the ability and realizes that repeated use could rapidly push its speed into extreme territory. He then recognizes that he had underestimated the importance of passive effects, particularly the way Lotus Burst enhances the range of all his abilities with each kill. Outside the stage, the recorded clear time shocks the observers. Even coordinated teams struggle to achieve similar results. Yet Itsuki surpasses previous benchmarks alone. When he exits, observers are confused by the lack of injuries and his unchanged level. The blue-haired assistant notes his condition with visible disbelief, acknowledging that he cleared the challenge effortlessly. As attention shifts to her Jade Butterfly familiar, she introduces herself as a Shikigami user and explains the nature of her class. She outlines the primary awakened categories, starting with elementalists, then Shikigami users, and finally revealing that Itsuki belongs to the rarest category, the Orderers. She explains that Orderers possess unique, exclusive abilities that do not follow standard ranking conventions, which is why information about them is scarce. Itsuki notes that her familiar surpasses her in strength, prompting her to explain that Shikigami absorb experience independently. Sensing the dark intent behind his observations, she grows uneasy but continues explaining. She describes the final class as too sensitive to discuss further and shifts the topic, informing him that the awakened he saved has recovered. With the current stage locked by cooldown, Itsuki decides to focus on strengthening Lotus Burst. He asks about a location suited for large-scale combat. The assistant identifies the Locust Desert, a hazardous area filled with countless low-level monsters. Despite her warnings, Itsuki remains confident and proceeds. Elsewhere, Rikinashita arrives too late, learning that his target has already moved on. Furious at being outpaced, he orders his men to deploy a tracker to follow residual mana traces, determined to capture the culprit alive. In a separate location, an assassin attempts to hide, believing himself safe, only to be ambushed by a massive red-eyed wolf. From above, the tracker Charles observes calmly as his familiar, Mort, executes the kill. Afterward, Charles receives word of Teru Oga's defeat and recognizes that a new target has emerged. Meanwhile, Itsuki and the assistant arrive at the Locust Desert. The environment is barren and unsettling, with no staff present due to the extreme danger. Skeletal remains confirm the threat posed by the endless swarms. Unfazed, Itsuki enters the stage alone. Inside, the desolate field is overrun by low-level locusts. Despite their weak individual strength, their numbers are overwhelming. Activating Lotus Burst, Itsuki allows the swarm to converge before unleashing wide-area explosions that annihilate them in waves. With each use, the skill's range expands rapidly. However, the absence of a completion signal alerts him that something is wrong. New swarms continue emerging endlessly. Realizing the presence of a hidden boss with a reproduction ability, Itsuki continues fighting to force further analysis. Explosion after explosion wipes out thousands, yet the numbers never diminish. Eventually, the source reveals itself as a locust queen, concealed underground and commanding infinite reproduction. With mana nearly depleted and the analysis close to completion, Itsuki presses on until a new ability is finally acquired. The newly gained mana sense restores energy based on detected enemies and grants an enormous detection range. Fully restored, Itsuki locates the queen instantly. Combining his enhanced piercing sphere with accumulated passive bonuses, he launches a decisive attack that tears through the ground and obliterates the boss. Appearing immediately afterward, he finishes the queen without resistance. Deprived of leadership, the remaining locusts descend into chaos and are swiftly eradicated. After collecting his rewards and setting a new record, Itsuki exits the stage. Expecting to find the assistant waiting, he instead discovers her unconscious, restrained by Charles. Before any exchange can escalate further, Itsuki launches himself forward at extreme speed, lightning enveloping his body. Charles barely has time to react before Mort intercepts the attack, blocking the blow with its massive form and shielding its master from impact. The detection ability identifies the creature as a B-rank Shikigami, and the analysis begins to advance steadily. From this, the protagonist realizes that the giant wolf is not a natural beast and that the man wearing the hat is its user. Charles observes the protagonist's movements and speed and understands why Oga was defeated without even needing to activate his armor. He restrains the wolf mort by treating it as leverage and positions the blue-haired assistant as a shield. Itsuki continues holding the wolf back while the analysis progresses. The creature opens its massive jaws and lunges forward, attempting to crush the protagonist's arm with full force. Despite the pressure, the attack is stopped by the ice arm, and the protagonist immediately forms a piercing sphere. The sphere detonates inside the wolf's mouth, sending the massive body flying backward from the impact. With the Shikigami temporarily neutralized, the protagonist recognizes that a user without their summoned beast is largely defenseless. The analysis reaches 77%. Charles is unsettled by the speed of the process and questions whether the young man is truly only a rookie. He explains that Mort possesses a responsibility that significantly shortens its revival time. The wolf regenerates and charges again. The protagonist activates Mana Sense, releasing a wave of energy that spreads across the battlefield. He evades the renewed assault and continues maintaining the skill, judging the decision to be correct. The analysis nears completion, but Itsuki notes that summoning the Blue Lotus now might alert the enemy. Charles grows increasingly desperate as he realizes the gap in power, speed, and detection ability. He tightens his grip on the assistant and threatens her again. The protagonist wants to complete the analysis without invoking the Lotus, but the situation becomes increasingly unstable. The analysis finally completes, granting the Shikigami Eater ability. The new skill allows control over Shikigami and raises his stats by 20 points. However, the healing effect fails due to the incomplete copy process. The protagonist understands that skipping the Blue Lotus caused the loss of healing, but he no longer considers it important since his condition has already stabilized. Mort charges once more, and the protagonist realizes the new ability allows him to steal Shikigami from other users. He prepares to use it immediately. His eyes glow red as he places his hand on the wolf's head, and a blue light envelopes the creature as it begins to transform. Using the moment of distraction, he delivers a powerful kick to the man in the hat, sending him flying. Charles reacts with fury toward the wolf, angered that all the experience he invested amounted to nothing. He once again threatens the assistant. Despite her weakened state, she urges the protagonist to keep fighting and not worry about her. The protagonist raises his hands in surrender to buy time. Charles, convinced of his control, reveals his identity and explains that he was sent by Ri Kineseta to capture him. Upon hearing the name, the protagonist understands that confronting Ri directly will be unavoidable. Charles issues further threats, warning the protagonist not to use his ice abilities. However, when both the user and the protagonist give commands, the wolf mort turns on its former master. A lotus symbol appears on its forehead as it bites down on Charles instead. Taking advantage of the opening, the protagonist uses his speed to rescue the assistant and holds her safely. Charles screams in confusion and pain as his own familiar attacks him. The protagonist approaches the wolf calmly, acknowledging it as his own. He resolved to make Charles pay for the suffering he caused. In panic, Charles attempts to bargain for his life by offering information about Ray. The protagonist considers the proposal, but remains composed. Charles misreads the situation and launches a counterattack, creating and firing a massive ice spike. The attack is dismissed without hesitation. The wolf is ordered to make Charles experience the same pain he inflicted. Terrified, Charles begs for mercy, but the wolf shows none and devours him without restraint. As the aftermath settles, the protagonist senses another presence that has been observing from afar. He challenges the watcher to reveal themselves. The scene widens to show the wheat field surrounding the stage structure. A hooded figure emerges from the crops, admitting he has been discovered. The newcomer denies any connection to Charles and introduces himself as Abiria. He recognizes Itsuki as the one who defeated Teru Oga and requests assistance, offering creation stones and weapons in exchange. He reflects on his father's teachings about meaningful rewards and realizes what the protagonist truly needs. Noticing the assistant's condition, Abiria warns that moving slowly could cost her life. He reveals a healing scroll and explains that while it is not instant, it will save her. The protagonist pauses and confirms the claim. Abiria explains the nature of artifacts, their rarity, and their categories, ranging from common to unique. He also explains the role of artisans and reveals that his father is among the top 10, known as the Artisan King of the North. The protagonist shows little reaction to the story and instead retrieves the crossbow Charles dropped earlier. Iberia explains that it is a rare artifact capable of generating its own ammunition and demonstrates how soul-bound artifacts can be stored. After thanking him for the healing item, the protagonist states his intention to find Rai Kanashida. Iberia reacts with surprise and admits they share the same target. He proposes forming a team for the Savior's national tournament preliminaries, explaining the structure of the competition and Ri's attempts to monopolize stages to advance faster. Iberia explains his own motivation, describing his admiration for his father and his desire to fight disaster beasts as an awakened. His father agreed to give him an artifact only if he passed the preliminaries on his own merit. Because of this, he is determined to succeed without relying on his family name. The protagonist questions why Iberia did not seek stronger allies. Iberia explains that the strongest participants have already been recruited by Ri, and that discovering someone who broke a record led him here. The partnership is accepted with the condition that the assistant is taken to the hospital first. As they prepare to leave, the protagonist briefly thinks about his friends and whether they will also enter the preliminaries. Elsewhere, Riku trains intensely for the upcoming event while Sayu observes him. Seo expresses concern about the recent attack and the protagonist's safety. Their exchange escalates into light sparring before a muscular man interrupts them, reminding them that the preliminaries are about to begin. At the same time, Raji Kanisasha examines 3 creation stones inside a silver briefcase. Irritated by his henchman's delay, he assumes something has gone wrong. In frustration, he crushes one of the stones and absorbs the experience it provides. He shifts his focus back to the preliminaries, knowing failure will bring severe consequences from his father. With support from hundreds of awakened recruits, he prepares to move forward. He uses the final creation stone and successfully levels up through the accumulated experience. Lightning spreads across his body as his power stabilizes at the new level. Far away, the protagonist appears surrounded by a faint blue aura, his expression steady and prepared for what lies ahead. Inside a hospital room, the protagonist apologizes to the commander for Aya's condition. Minyu considers eliminating the rich kid immediately, but the protagonist stops him and makes it clear that he will handle the matter himself. After a brief pause, the commander agrees and asks to be informed of the details later. Iberia is shocked to discover that Minyu is the young man's master and immediately becomes overly excited. The protagonist states that he will be entering the preliminaries with Iberia and asks about Aya's condition. She is reported to be stable thanks to her jade butterfly and Iberia's rare artifact. Minyu recognizes the item and correctly identifies Iberia as the son of the famous artisan Aiden. Startled that the commander knows his father, Iberia attempts to carry himself more seriously but ends up misspeaking out of nervousness. The mistake leaves everyone momentarily stunned before the commander calmly corrects him. Completely embarrassed, Iberia fixes his statement. Minyu thanks him for saving his daughter and mentions that he plans to visit Aiden after the tournament. He then instructs both young men to prepare, informing them that he and Aya will be watching the next day. With confidence, the duo agrees and assures him they will pass the preliminaries. Aya comments that her father has always liked the protagonist, recalling how she was often taken along to his meetings. Minyu then explains that, due to past trauma, the protagonist has a strong self-destructive tendency, but that tendency weakens significantly when there is someone nearby he wants to protect. Because of this, he deliberately placed his daughter by the young man's side, assigning her the role of becoming his closest friend and the person he would most want to protect. He then reveals that the attack on the school was not accidental, but a deliberate act. The number of traitors aligned with the beasts is increasing, and humanity's situation is worsening. Even so, he expresses firm belief that the protagonist will change that future and become a guiding light for humanity. The scene shifts to the Northern District 4, where the tournament preliminaries are being held. Upon arrival, the protagonist and Iberia see that the number of participants has risen from 3,000 to 5,000. The increase irritates Ri, who views it as unnecessary interference. Seo and Rika notice that Ri's allies are marked with red ribbons for identification. Soon after, Soryu appears to explain the rules. The arena is divided into 2 zones, with participants starting from different locations. The first phase is a race toward the inner area, where a rival order determines ranking. Only the top 500 will advance. Participants are limited to carrying 2 tools. Iberia draws the protagonist's attention to this restriction as Riku observes the function of the bracelets. Sayo notes how ruthless it is to eliminate thousands in the opening phase. Ri arrives with his henchmen and asserts control, ordering everyone not to move ahead of him. Iberia recognizes the awakened fighters re-recruited and quietly plans to act once an opening appears. However, the protagonist walks straight toward them without hesitation. The henchmen immediately notice the absence of a red ribbon, leaving Iberia stunned by his partner's behavior. The signal is given, and the first phase begins as participants rush forward. Observers comment that enthusiasm alone is meaningless without ability. Past tournaments are discussed, including rare cases of high-level rookies. Rumors circulate about a gifted student, which Commander Minuizumi quietly confirms. This draws interest from the officials, who begin scanning participant data. Several candidates are dismissed due to mediocre aptitude or support roles. One unusually high-level rookie briefly draws attention. But Minuizumi does not agree with the assessment. The discussion shifts to curiosity about level 0 participants. Back in the arena, Ri and his henchmen mock the protagonist. He remains unfazed and activates one of his artifacts, standing his ground. Ri is surprised by the reaction and attempts to assert dominance. The protagonist meets his gaze calmly, making it clear he is not intimidated. Ri assumes the young man is a disposable pawn and orders his men to seize him. Lightning begins to surround Ri as his subordinates move to encircle the pair. One of them dismisses the situation entirely, confident in the numerical and level advantage. Iberia knows he could handle one opponent, but believes facing 4 is unrealistic. He prepares to activate an artifact, but the protagonist stops him. The lead henchman openly underestimates the protagonist, convinced the encounter will be effortless. Without hesitation, the protagonist steps forward and confronts him directly. The sheer audacity leaves the henchman stunned before he breaks into laughter, joined by the others. One of the men who had previously lost to the protagonist observes with interest, finding his attitude familiar. Before the taunts can escalate further, the protagonist delivers a clean, decisive punch to the henchman's face, knocking him unconscious instantly. Standing over him, the protagonist remains composed. The remaining henchmen are shaken, struggling to understand how someone 7 levels lower achieved this. Confusion spreads among them, though one tries to dismiss it as luck. Another, growing irritated, unleashes a powerful fire-based attack. The speed of the assault leaves Iberia momentarily frozen, unable to react. When the flames subside, the protagonist emerges unharmed, shielded by a black ice wall. Iberia watches in disbelief as the realization sets in that the attack was fully blocked. The protagonist calmly signals for Iberia to step back, making it clear he intends to handle the fight alone. The masked henchman is left staring in shock, unable to comprehend how ice was used without a water elementalist present. The protagonist provokes another attack, stating that he will not defend himself this time. The opponent assumes it is a bluff and accepts, while the young man calmly maintains his stance. The masked fighter gathers everything he has left and releases his strongest fire technique, determined to finish the fight in one strike. The protagonist remains completely still. Even with the increased output, he recognizes it as the same type of attack. From the outside, it appears reckless, and some observers believe his strength already rivals that of a higher-level awakened. The masked henchman expends all of his remaining energy, convinced that using it on a level 0 opponent is a waste, but confident the fight is over. The result leaves him stunned. The outcome is nothing like what he expected. The protagonist confirms through experience that the passive effect of his ice-based defense does not stack when facing the same attack repeatedly. With that understanding complete, he turns his attention to the remaining enemies, deciding to end the confrontation. One of the brutes believes he has already identified the young man's weakness and responds by unleashing a fire barrier at full power. The protagonist questions whether they intend to win through numbers alone and reinforces his defense. A large explosion follows as flames collide with the barrier, filling the area with smoke. The brute assumes the young man's energy reserves are limited and plans to exhaust him. When the smoke clears, he is shocked to find the protagonist standing directly in front of him. The distance was closed instantly. The protagonist notes that the defensive effect triggered only once during the exchange. The brute attempts to compensate with raw strength, but the protagonist calmly questions whether any real force is being used at all. With a single strike, he sends the man flying, removing him from the fight. Observing the aftermath, the protagonist realizes how the defensive calculation functions and shifts his focus to the last two opponents. Both remaining enemies rely on lightning-based abilities. Recognizing the opportunity, he engages them directly. They launch their combined attack, but the protagonist absorbs the impact and counters without hesitation. Moments later, both collapse, unable to continue. With the skirmish over, the protagonist briefly reflects on how easily the encounter concluded. He understands that the lightning-based passive functions the same way as his ice defense, activating only once per target. Iberia looks over the fallen opponents in disbelief, openly impressed by the outcome. He admits he expected a difficult battle and never imagined the fight would end so decisively. One of the defeated men, still conscious, struggles to understand how someone labeled as level 0 could overpower them so thoroughly. Iberia approaches with visible excitement, making a bold declaration about their partnership. The protagonist ignores the theatrics entirely and moves forward, pulling Iberia along and reminding him of their actual objective. The injured henchman remains confused by the nickname Iberia chose and dismisses it as unimpressive. Elsewhere, a bespectacled observer notices the disturbance and assumes the level 0 participant should have been eliminated by now. However, he recognizes the presence of a beast that once belonged to Charles and quietly notes that few individuals outside the alliance would have been capable of subduing him. Another participant boasts about his speed while overtaking others, only to be struck suddenly by a bolt of purple lightning. He collapses in pain, unable to understand how he was attacked mid-sprint. The bespectacled man steps on him without hesitation, his body crackling with energy, making it clear that running ahead was a mistake. He orders his group to conserve their strength and ignore anyone unworthy of their attention. From a distance, a woman remarks on the arrogance of the administrator's son from District 4. Despite her disapproval, she acknowledges that his behavior does not violate any rules. Confident in his position, the rich kid advances, certain he will easily clear the next phase. The scene shifts to the inner area, where early arrivals gather and wait. The rich kid arrives first and displays open satisfaction with his performance. Suddenly, a bolt of blue lightning cuts through the sky, forcing him to turn around in shock. In the rain, the protagonist and Iberia emerge together. The henchmen are stunned, unable to believe the pair survived. The rich kid assumes his subordinates must have been bribed, unwilling to accept the truth. Iberia recognizes that reaching this point was only possible because the protagonist eliminated every obstacle along the way. Uninterested in lingering, the rich kid prepares to move on and orders his remaining forces to deal with the two intruders. Iberia freezes when he realizes how many enemies remain, but the protagonist calms him and signals for him to shield his ears. A powerful lightning shockwave erupts, sweeping through the area and throwing the surrounding henchmen aside. The rich kid watches without concern, unconcerned with their fate. The path is cleared instantly, leaving Iberia stunned by the sheer scale of the display. The protagonist turns his focus fully to the rich kid, making it clear the confrontation is not over. In the distance, other participants arrive and comment on the unusual resistance they encountered. Rankings begin to form, and several notable competitors draw attention. Iberia collapses after reaching the inner area, calling out urgently. Others recognize the protagonist surrounded by blue lightning, confirming his identity beyond doubt. Observers begin to question why he is so fixated on the rich kid. Concerned by the escalation, Izumi quietly instructs a senior awakened to intervene if the situation spirals out of control. The senior watches with interest, impressed by the young man's speed and wondering how it compares to his own past. Irritated, the rich kid prepares to escalate the situation further, framing it not as a battle, but a one-sided elimination. His forces regroup and charge all at once toward the lone figure standing in their path. One attacker launches a full-powered strike, only for the protagonist to stop it with a single hand. The counterattack follows immediately, sending the attacker flying with overwhelming force. The remaining henchmen hesitate, but attempt to reassure themselves through numbers alone. The protagonist advances without hesitation. With decisive intent, he releases a massive burst of power that engulfs the area, knocking every remaining enemy to the ground. Observers across the arena react in disbelief at the scale of destruction. As the dust settles, the protagonist stands alone at the center, having restrained himself intentionally. All opposition lies defeated. He faces the rich kid directly, leaving no room for escape. Terrified, the rich kid struggles to comprehend how one person could overwhelm so many. He lashes out with a powerful lightning-based attack, but the protagonist avoids it effortlessly, reinforcing the difference between them. Realizing defeat is inevitable, the rich kid panics and calls for outside intervention. A red-eyed man appears, unconcerned with protocol. The rich kid openly relies on him, confident in the difference in power. From above, a senior observer signals approval for the intervention. At the same time, the protagonist senses a powerful presence approaching at extreme speed, recognizing that the situation has escalated beyond the preliminary stage. As the analysis continues, the protagonist realizes that the threat is not limited to a single opponent. A massive brute suddenly comes flying toward him, crashing into the ground with a heavy impact that sends dust rising into the air. Despite the force of the arrival, the young man remains completely unfazed. He calmly observes the situation, showing neither tension nor fear. Before the brute can act, Shu Heighten appears and subdues the attacker with a single decisive strike, purple lightning surrounding him as he intervenes. With the obstacle removed, the protagonist turns his attention back to the rich kid, fully aware that the situation has reached its conclusion. Desperation drives the rich kid to invoke his family's influence in an attempt to save himself, but the attempt fails completely. The protagonist advances without hesitation, striking him down and leaving him writhing on the ground. Looking at the fallen body, he makes it clear through his actions that this outcome is the result of everything the man did to IA. From a distance, the blue-haired woman witnesses the scene and becomes visibly flustered by what she sees. Her father notes that the rich kid has already been defeated and briefly wonders why the protagonist is now looking in their direction. The analysis reaches its final stages, and the young man deliberately pauses it, conserving his stamina for later. At that moment, a familiar voice calls out to him. He turns instinctively, immediately recognizing who it is. Sayo and Riku finally arrive, relieved to see him safe. Concerned about the heavy rain, Sayo urges him to move inside, worried about his condition. The moment becomes emotional as Riku and Iberia rush forward and cling to him, overwhelmed with relief. Riku eyes the blonde suspiciously, clearly displeased by how close he is, while Iberia confidently presents himself as the protagonist's partner. The reaction from the group is mixed, ranging from surprise to disbelief, and the tension dissolves into light teasing as Iberia enthusiastically insists on naming their duo. Soon after, the announcer declares the end of the first phase. Only 500 participants remain, and the rest are eliminated. The second phase is announced, explaining that each participant will now fight beasts alone for a full hour inside the arena. Iberia is visibly shaken by the idea, while the others quietly prepare themselves. Above the arena, Shu Heighten watches with clear excitement, eager to see what the rookies will reveal. Rankings from the first phase are displayed, and the participants are drawn toward the massive arena where the second phase will unfold. As they enter, the atmosphere grows heavier. Rika comments on the darkness of the place and questions whether the protagonist's level truly remains fixed at 0. Iberia also wonders how he continues to grow stronger, but Sayo quickly shuts down the curiosity, reminding them that the abilities of order breakers are not meant to be discussed. High above, the organizers gather, and the presence of legendary figures draws attention from everyone present. The rules of the second phase are laid out clearly, with points awarded based on difficulty, ranging from beginner to nightmare. Each victory allows a brief rest before progressing further. Some participants boldly declare their intent to challenge the highest difficulty immediately. The protagonist, however, calmly raises a question regarding the limits of the nightmare class. His inquiry draws ridicule from others, who believe he lacks the ability to even clear the lowest tier. The announcer explains that there is no true upper limit, and the significance will become clear once a nightmare beast is faced. The revelation that points now contribute toward the main tournament and alliance membership shocks many, forcing them to reassess their strategies. The second phase begins. The arena initially appears no different from other stages. A group of low-level Calamity Hounds emerges, and the protagonist swiftly engages them, eliminating the entire group in a single instant. Observers are stunned by the speed of the clear, as such fights usually take minutes. The next opponent, a much stronger salamander, appears. Flames engulf the area as it attacks, completely surrounding the protagonist. Concern rises among the spectators, but moments later, he emerges unharmed, fully protected. He closes the distance and cleaves the creature apart in a matter of seconds, securing another swift victory. The deliberate nature of his approach reveals his intent to strengthen himself through every encounter. Without resting, he immediately advances to the next challenge. A powerful electric rhino appears, known for its devastating charge and paralyzing lightning. Rather than evading, the protagonist calmly approaches and allows the creature to strike him directly. The impact sends him flying, but a protective aura prevents serious injury. From the control room, concern spikes, but Shu Heighten remains composed, noting that the young man's actions consistently defy expectations. The protagonist absorbs the attack, adapts instantly, and retaliates with overwhelming speed. He dismantles the creature with precision, ending the fight almost as quickly as it began. The next opponent is announced as the most feared beast of the preliminaries. A massive purgatory giant appears, towering over the arena with its armored body, chains, and brutal combat abilities. Without hesitation, the protagonist launches his attack and destroys the creature almost immediately. The speed and efficiency of the victory leave the observers speechless. While others across the arena continue their own battles, some struggling and others advancing steadily, the protagonist moves on without pause. The control room descends into disbelief as his performance continues to surpass expectations. At Shu Heighten's command, the difficulty is increased further. Two massive giants appear at once, charging toward him with full force. The protagonist calmly prepares his next strike, unfazed by the numbers, and eliminates one of them almost instantly, continuing his relentless advance. The announcer reacts in disbelief, questioning whether the sphere has any upper limit to its power. Shu Heighten, however, recognizes that while the ability is overwhelming, it carries a fatal weakness. At that moment, the remaining giant launches forward with absurd speed. The sudden movement catches the protagonist off guard. The creature's speed exceeds anything he has faced before. Inside the control room, the staff note that giants are often mistaken for slow beings due to their massive size. In reality, these giants belong to a fast and agile type. Their lack of mana is compensated by overwhelmingly high physical attributes, far surpassing normal standards. Realizing the danger, the protagonist hastily forms another sphere, attempting to strike before the giant closes the distance. The attack travels directly toward the monster, revealing its high agility and defense. Yet, to his shock, the giant avoids the sphere entirely. The control room quickly understands the situation. The sphere's travel speed is insufficient, and the previous hit relied on the creature's roar to connect. Without increasing its speed, progress is impossible. The giant retaliates with a powerful punch. The protagonist narrowly avoids it as the blow crashes into the arena floor, releasing violent shockwaves. Debris, dust, and shattered ground spread outward from the impact. Facing the situation, the protagonist understands that the attacks are avoidable and that a change in approach is required. Shu Heighten observes that continuing to rely on the same skill suggests a lack of remaining options. However, the protagonist shifts tactics, deciding to close the distance instead. He activates Thunder Wave, lightning enveloping his body and drastically increasing his speed. Both combatants rush toward one another. The giant throws another full-force punch, smashing the ground and carving out a crater. Despite the chaos, the protagonist advances through the dust and destruction. Inside the control room, Aju reacts in visible fear, unable to look away. The announcer panics and calls for emergency intervention, but Shurten stops the order and calmly insists on waiting. Although the giant's power is overwhelming, its attacks remain meaningless if they fail to connect. The monster attacks again, striking the ground with full force. In that brief opening, the protagonist draws its attention. The giant turns, only to realize he is already behind it. At point-blank range, the sphere is released and passes cleanly through the creature's head. Lightning still coursing through his body, the protagonist watches as the giant collapses lifelessly to the ground. The victory is confirmed. The sphere's speed increases dramatically, and a massive point gain is recorded within seconds. In the control room, the announcer and Shu Heighten observe the fallen body in silence. AIA reacts with visible relief and celebration, only to become embarrassed moments later when her reaction is noticed. The announcer remarks on her unusual enthusiasm, noting how much more expressive she has become. Shu Heighten reflects on the battle, questioning why the protagonist avoided earlier when victory was possible. The explanation is clear through observation alone. His base speed closely matches that of a purgatory giant, but once electricity flows through his body, his speed increases beyond their ability to react. Under those conditions, their attacks cannot land. With his accumulated points, first place is effectively secured. Yet the protagonist does not stop. His focus remains fixed ahead. Surpassing the strongest requires a continuous movement without hesitation. He advances as the next phase begins immediately. The third phase starts with 3 giants. The protagonist prepares himself and immediately attacks, focusing all his power on one target. Shu Heighten observes that the decision to continue is exactly what he expected. He recalls reaching phase 4 himself once, while the announcer wonders how far the protagonist can go, noting that even with exceptional physical ability, phase 3 is usually the limit. One of the remaining giants charges forward. The protagonist dodges its punch as it slams into the ground, sending dust and rocks flying. Activating Thunder Wave once more, he increases his agility, moves behind the creature, and closes the gap. Moments later, the second giant falls, and the sphere's speed rises even further. Calmly turning, the protagonist faces the final giant of the phase. This one behaves differently. It opens its massive mouth, chains erupting outward as it attempts to devour him. Its glowing red eyes lock onto the protagonist, its enormous body and heavy armor marking it as a far greater threat. Without hesitation, the protagonist activates Lotus Burst at maximum output. A fire-based attack is launched directly into the creature's face. The explosion is decisive, and the level 15 monster is eliminated almost instantly. Within seconds, another massive point total is added, setting a new record. The control room is left stunned. The announcer recognizes the fire skill as the same one responsible for the devastation in the first phase. The attack drains the protagonist's mana completely, leaving nothing remaining. However, as monsters continue to appear, his passive ability immediately begins restoring it. The fourth phase begins with 4 giants, and his mana rapidly recovers. Shurten notes that surpassing this stage would place the boy beyond all except Jin Taiwa. With visible anticipation, he watches the protagonist move forward without hesitation. The protagonist considers the growing speed of his sphere, realizing that higher velocity increases accuracy at range. With a few more increases, long-distance strikes may become viable. However, his mana remains limited, and every shot must count. Suddenly, one of the giants roars, firing chains from its mouth toward him. The protagonist prepares his sphere, but the creature acts faster than expected. The chains bind him tightly, and the giant slams him into the arena floor with overwhelming force. The impact leaves a deep crater. Completely restrained, the protagonist is unable to move. The situation becomes critical as the giant raises its massive hand and brings it down to crush him. The pressure is immense, and his body is pushed to its limit. The monster steps back, observing the destruction it has caused. Lying motionless within the crater, the protagonist is badly injured. The scene gives the impression that the battle has finally ended. Inside the control room, panic spreads. The announcer urgently calls for intervention. Cheyenne hesitates, recalling his own past and recognizing the similarity to his previous defeat. Shuen prepares to move, but the commander stops him. Izumi remains calm. He observes quietly, confident that the protagonist has not yet truly given up. Panic spreads through the control room as the announcer becomes convinced that without immediate intervention, the young man will perish. The commander, however, remains composed. He is certain that the situation has not yet reached its conclusion. When questioned, his certainty comes from the young man's eyes. Even crushed beneath overwhelming force, those eyes still burn with resolve, surrounded by a faint blue aura. There is no sign of surrender. Within the crater, the protagonist activates over mimes and resumes the analysis he had deliberately paused earlier. His thoughts return to the battle against Ri and the moment he initiated analysis on his Violet Thunder Cannon. That analysis had been halted at 99%, preserved for a moment exactly like this. Now, as the final percentage completes, a blue aura fully envelopes his body. The newly completed Thunder Wave manifests, and a blue lotus forms within the control room itself, drawing immediate attention. The woman with glasses reacts with disbelief, while Shu Heighten is visibly taken aback by the sight. The effects become apparent as the aura stabilizes, granting a massive boost to agility, restoring health completely, cleansing all debuffs, and reinforcing his overall physical capacity. The blue lotus detonates into light, and the young man rises. His movements are steady, his presence transformed. The announcer is left stunned by the sheer scale of recovery and growth, far exceeding what even specialized healers can achieve. Without hesitation, the protagonist resumes combat. Two giants fall almost instantly to his sphere, its speed increasing further with each strike. The fourth phase concludes rapidly, followed by the fifth, then the sixth. Each phase ends faster than the last, each granting escalating rewards. Within minutes, the arena becomes a graveyard of colossal bodies. In the control room, silence replaces disbelief. No one speaks as the outcome unfolds before them. Amid the fallen giants, the protagonist sits among the remains and reflects briefly on the scene, questioning whether this place resembles hell more than a trial. Moments later, he notices that no further enemies appear. Confusion sets in as the absence of the next phase becomes undeniable. The announcer finally understands. The truth is revealed without embellishment. The young man has eliminated every purgatory giant prepared for the event. Standing atop the bodies, the protagonist processes the result, realizing that the gap between himself and Jin Taiwa has narrowed considerably. His objective of accelerating the sphere has been fully achieved. As his experience fails to convert into a level increase, it instead condenses into a blue karma stone. The value of the item shocks Shu Heighten, while the commander calmly explains the reason. With a fixed level and unrestricted growth, the implications are unsettling. The protagonist retrieves the stone, satisfied with the outcome, and turns toward the exit. The massive metal doors of the arena slowly open. Confirmation of victory spreads through the control room as the final results are recorded. Attention turns to the young man's future, offers of guidance and instruction briefly considered, only to be dismissed when it becomes clear that he already walks under capable mentorship. Izumi watches from a distance as the pieces fall into place. When the protagonist acknowledges him as his teacher, the realization sends another ripple of shock through the room. Congratulations follow, along with concern for his condition, but aside from exhaustion, he shows no signs of injury. As events elsewhere continue, comparisons are made. Other participants reach their limits far earlier, unable to push beyond the hard class. Observations shift to those still fighting, including Shikigami users whose abilities reveal unexpected depth and terrifying latent power. The protagonist, watching briefly, recognizes the strength he has overlooked before. With his own goals complete, he prepares to leave. However, something unusual catches his attention. His partner appears clad in red armor, radiating immense power. The artifact's nature is quickly understood, an epic creation with escalating effects and severe drawbacks. Even so, its presence confirms that the Nightmare class announcement was no coincidence. The second phase of the tournament concludes shortly afterward. Rankings are finalized, revealing the protagonist firmly in first place, far ahead of all others. Reactions range from disbelief to renewed determination. Recognition spreads across the country as his performance cements his position at the top. As the preliminaries officially end, the protagonist supports his exhausted partner and exits the arena. Elsewhere, far from the celebration, an old prophet awakens from meditation with a dire vision. Danger looms over the northern continent, heralded by an approaching calamity beyond ordinary measures. Later, back among allies, the commander evaluates the protagonist's growth. Surpassing 1,500 total stats places him on par with Awakened far beyond his level. His abilities continue to defy conventional limits, especially in agility and defense. The tension eases briefly as the group gathers to rest. Exhaustion gives way to normalcy, meals are shared, and energy slowly returns. Laughter and irritation blend together as hunger overrides decorum, restoring strength in the simplest way possible. Eventually, attention shifts inward. The commander poses a question meant to ground them, not about strength but fear. One by one, reflections surface, shaped by pasts and vulnerabilities. When the focus finally turns to the protagonist, silence follows. Even those closest to him struggle to imagine what could truly frighten someone who has already surpassed so many limits. The moment lingers unanswered. He reflects on the time after his parents passed away, when survival itself felt uncertain. Anxiety consumed him, followed by anger, sadness, hunger, and a deep sense of helplessness. Those emotions lingered until Sayo and Riku appeared in his life and helped him endure that difficult period. Their presence slowly pulled him out of that negative state, offering warmth and stability when he needed it most. Remembering their concern and simple kindness, he realizes how much those moments mattered to him. His thoughts move forward to meeting Minyu and later fighting alongside Iberia. Standing there now, he feels something he had not felt in a long time, a sense of belonging. To him, it no longer feels like he simply gained companions. Instead, it feels as though his family has grown. The calm relief he experiences is something he wishes could last indefinitely. More than anything, his greatest fear had always been living completely alone. AIA notices that his aura has softened, no longer carrying the oppressive intensity it once did. Iberia becomes emotional and embraces him tightly, unwilling to let go. Observing them, the commander explains that the purpose of the question was to ensure they would carry no regrets, as regrets are forbidden for saviors. Passing forward without regret is the ideal every savior must strive for. The group is then instructed to finish their meal, with the news that Sayo and Riku will return to their district the following day. The next morning, everyone exchanges farewells and promises to meet again at the Grand National Tournament. The protagonist lightly teases the blonde about growing close to Riku and recalls wanting to ask Sayo something, deciding to leave it for later. Soon after, Ajaha rushes in with urgency, her expression tense. She delivers confidential information from the southern continent to her father, information reserved only for the strongest. She reveals a prophecy made by Commander Bargar, foretelling a beast invasion of the northern continent. Though its reliability is questioned, she explains that Bargar is the most renowned prophet alive. Evacuation is suggested, but the commander believes he himself is the likely target. By remaining, he can serve as bait to draw the beasts away. Despite his daughter's insistence to leave, he remains firm. The protagonist offers his strength if needed, but the commander instead assigns him a task. He orders the two young men to protect Aiden, Iberia's father and the greatest artisan across all continents. Iberia is confused, while the protagonist senses that his master intends to send him away for his own protection. The commander then turns to his daughter and gives her 3 instructions: announce the attack, evacuate civilians, and prepare the strongest awaken for the coming battle. He calls for Heighten and prepares to intercept the beasts himself. Ajaha